Welcome to the Refurbishment Mastery podcast with me, Martin Rapley. If you're a property investor who is worried about paying too much for your next property, concerned that you don't know how to manage a refurb, or scared that you will be ripped off by a builder, then this is for you. In this podcast, I share over 30 years of experience of managing refurbishments and conversions to help you make more profit, save your time, and ultimately enjoy the process. On with the podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Refurbishment Mastery podcast. In this edition, I'm going to be clearing up some of the uncertainty around Article 4 directions. Now, I'm pretty certain as a property investor, you're aware of Article 4 directions. If you're not, I'll explain what they're all about. But even if you are aware of them, I want to point out to you that they're not necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, if you understand more about them, they can actually turn into a good thing. And I'll share with you a case study of someone I worked with a number of years ago who used Article 4 directions to their benefit. So way back in time, I think somewhere back in the 1990s or possibly even earlier than that, central government brought in a number of permitted development rights that were possible to be done to standard residential houses. And I'm sure some of you are aware of those permitted development rights. The one that most people are aware of is the ability to extend a semi-detached house 3 meters, build an extension on the back 3 meters. But there's other permitted development rights, like you're permitted to change the windows, you're permitted to convert a garage into a room, and quite a lot of those. I'll cover all of those on another episode. When this legislation was brought in, there were a number of local authorities that didn't feel it was appropriate for them. So they didn't feel that it could be a carte blanche permitted development across the whole country. So they kicked up a bit of a stink. And as a result, central government went back and looked at the legislation and said, that makes some sense. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring in something that is called an Article 4 direction. Now, I'm not quite sure why it was called an Article 4 direction. I wonder if there is Article 1, 2, and 3 as well. But an Article 4 direction, which was effectively an amendment to the legislation they'd brought in previously. And the Article 4 direction is effectively a planning legislation tool that allows the local planning authority to remove certain permitted development rights for the whole area. So it could be the whole local authority area, it could be part of their area, or indeed it could be individual properties. So effectively, we've got this carte blanche legislation that says we can have permitted development, but local authorities can remove that or restrict that in certain parts of their borough. And the key thing here is, though, that they can't just have a meeting one day and say, right, we're going to close down all of the permitted development. There is actually a process that has to be followed. So the local authorities have to put together a proposal. They have to put out consultation. They have to allow time for consultation to come back. They have to review that. So by and large, in round numbers, any local authority that wants to bring in an Article 4 direction, it's going to take them circa 6 months. And generally, the local authorities haven't done this carte blanche across their whole boroughs. They've looked at specific areas or specific use classes where they have restricted the permitted development. Now, the one use class that most property investors are aware of, or one impact of Article 4 that most property investors are aware of, is and this is where it gets called Article 4, and this is what I'm here to unpack for you. The one thing is that a lot of boroughs have restricted or completely banned C3 to C4 permitted development conversions. So under the central government legislation, it is possible to take a C3, which is designated really as a family house, and repurpose that building to C4 use. And C4 use is a shared house, an HMO type house for up to 6 people. So in large parts of the country, it is permitted development. It is perfectly possible to go C3 to C4. And you don't even have to make any approach to the local authority. You literally just start using the property in a different way. As long as you don't have more than 6 people living in the property, then under the planning regulations in large parts of the country, you can just take a family house and start using it as an HMO. Of course, you need to comply with the HMO legislation as far as minimum room spaces, sizes, and as far as amenity space and things like that. That's separate. That's a separate thing. What we're talking about here is from a planning perspective, it is possible in large areas of the country to do C3 to C4 conversions. However, in some areas, some boroughs, some parts of some boroughs, these C3 to C4 conversions under permitted development have been removed. So under using an Article 4 direction, the local authority have removed the permitted development of C3 to C4 conversions. And a number of property investors therefore say, oh, the area is subject to an Article 4, I can't do HMOs. However, be aware that the local authority can use Article 4 directions for other purposes as well. And not all Article 4 directions are actually relating to C3 to C4 conversions. I actually own a property in an Article 4 area, but that has nothing to do with HMOs. In my property, which actually is an HMO, and was converted under C3 to C4 and is now actually sui generis, but originally went C3 to C4, there was no issue with the Article 4 direction, because the Article 4 direction in that particular part of the town where I invest actually stops me making material changes to the outside of the property. And I said in the introduction that in most areas you are able to change the windows of your property under permitted development. Well, in my particular case, I can't change the windows under permitted development because the Article 4 direction says we cannot change the external aspect of the property. I can't repaint the property. I can't actually. I've got some railings out the front of the property. I'm not allowed to take them down. They've got to stay the same black as they are at the moment. The front door's got to stay black. The porch, there's a little porch on the front. It's a funny little detail. But if I wanted to change that, I would need to get planning approval for that, because the local authority in that particular area are trying to maintain the historic styling of the borough. Now, personally, I'm not sure the area has got a lot of historic styling. It's close to a very important church, so maybe that affects it to some extent. But at the bottom of the road, it's definitely not the best part of town at all. But each to their own. This is what they've got. So the first thing to learn from this is just because a borough has bought in Article 4 doesn't necessarily hinder you from doing C3 to C4 HMO conversions. So double check this. And this is the key thing here. You need to understand how the Article 4 directive has been applied to your particular area. So first thing is, whenever you're investing in an area, the first thing is to actually have Google and see if there is an Article 4 directive in your area. Local authorities will have those areas somewhere on their website, either in the form of a map or in the form of some kind of schedule based on postcode areas, based on roads, possibly based on wards or something like that. So the first thing to do is get clarity on what applies to you. So in my area, where I've got an HMO in an Article 4 area, there are other parts of the borough that have actually used where Article 4 is being used to restrict HMOs. So that's fine. Not in the area not the area of the borough where I'm investing, but in other areas. So you're going to have to read these and understand what applies for you, because most property investors are concerned about or checking into the C3 to C4 conversions, but do be careful. You may not have any permitted development to convert the two floors above a shop into residential. So it could be that that permitted development right has been removed as well. A little bit less likely at the moment because that's relatively new legislation. And of course, as I said, it can take up to 6 months for a local authority to bring in Article 4 directions. But what you will find as time goes on, that some of the other permitted development rights the central government have brought in will be withdrawn or restricted using an Article 4 direction within your area. So this is a moving target. This is something you need to know about on a regular basis. In reality, it's worth checking every time you buy a new property that you want to develop out. If you're buying a flat for holding and renting for the long term, that probably doesn't matter at all. But if you're looking at doing refurbishment and converting, then it's well worth keeping your finger on the pulse. And that's something that planning consultants are well aware of. So planning consultants and many architects, but perhaps not all architects, but certainly the planning consultants in your area will know when there's a new Article 4 direction coming on board, as will other property investors and other people in your area. And you'll hear the talk. I hear it from people I'm working with and people close to me. You know when a borough is bringing in an Article 4 direction or considering an Article 4 direction, and you know that you've got some targets to hit. So Google your local authority. Double check where the Article 4s are, if there are any Article 4s. Double check what they relate to, and understand them. Keep your finger on the pulse, and then you'll be able to work with them, work around them. And be aware that if the local authority is going to bring in Article 4 directions relating to something in your borough, it's probably going to take them 6 months to do that, in which case you've got time to implement things, perhaps therefore getting grandfather rights and getting perhaps some benefit of additional value, particularly with the C3 to C4 conversion option. Let me just finish off by relaying a story of an investor I worked with on the South Coast a number of years ago. Went into his office, and there was a map on the wall with lots and lots of pins in the map, yellow pins all over this map. And I asked him what the pins signified, and he said, because I jokingly said, there's hundreds of them. Is this your portfolio? And he said, no, the pins signified the HMOs in the borough, because he was investing in an Article 4 area. So the particular area here had an Article 4 direction applied to it. But within the Article 4 direction, it didn't say you cannot do C3 to C4 conversions under permitted development. What it said was that you had to show that there was no more than 2 HMOs within a certain radius. I can't remember what that radius was. And let's say it's within 100 meters. So by having this map on the wall, he could see when a property came on the market that was in this area, and he wanted to convert to a C4 small HMO up to 6 people, he could put that on the map and he could very quickly see whether there were more than 2 HMOs within a 100-meter radius, or whatever that figure was. So this was his way of finding deals. A property would come onto the open market. He knew he could add value to that by turning that into an HMO. And he knew that if it was in one of the pockets where there were gaps, and there were definitely gaps, when you looked at this map, you could see where the gaps were. And he just watched Rightmove for these properties to come up, and then he would obviously make an offer and then convert them into HMOs. So many property investors, and I knew a lot of property investors, were running away from this particular town because it was an Article 4, and there was no point in doing HMOs here. The Article 4 direction didn't allow C3 to C4 conversion, so we're not doing HMOs there. Rubbish place to invest. Don't know why you want to be investing in all of this negativity. Meanwhile, this particular developer that I was doing some work with had read the details, gone into it in some depth, worked out the angles, and to make it even easier for himself, plotted the whole lot onto a map in his office. Nowadays, of course, we do that on a Google map, but I think it was very front of mind in his office, and it was, to some extent, it was a bit of a talking point as well. And his office, he was actually managing HMOs as well. He was managing HMOs for other investors, so there were people coming and going all of the time, possibly potential clients that would want him to manage their properties. So, of course, it was a talking point, but just serves the purpose to show to you that Article 4 directions are not a bad thing. They are about removing some elements of permitted development. They are not just about HMOs. And in some respects, as my one, it's not overly onerous. I've got no desire to paint the front door of my HMO sky blue pink. It's perfectly all right in black. It's in keeping with the rest of the street anyway. Why would I want to do anything different? I've just got to be a little bit mindful that my windows can't be replaced. And actually, I've got timber windows in that particular property with secondary glazing. So it's a little bit old-fashioned. It would be nice to change the windows. To be fair, I could change the windows. I would just need to get planning permission to do it and probably get the details agreed. So it's not impossible, but it's just a little bit restrictive. But understand the directions in your area. Be clear how you can work with them. They're not always super onerous, and there could well be some angles in here that a lot of less experienced property investors aren't going to understand, and therefore there could be whole pockets of the country where, with additional knowledge, there is some great investment opportunities which the novice and less experienced investors are running away from. So, don't overlook Article 4 areas, but be aware that they are more than just HMOs, although there are huge areas where they are only HMOs. And perhaps look at properties with a slightly different, slightly different eye going forward. And don't be put off by Article 4, but do your research and understand what it is all about. So thank you very much for listening. I'll catch up with you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Please do like, share and leave a comment where you can. If you need any guidance or advice with anything to do with your refurbishments or conversions, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can book a free call with me by clicking on the link at the top of my website, refurbishmentmastery.com. There's other ways you can contact me in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.